So today I want to talk a little bit about automation. And automation is a very powerful tool that you will use all the time in modern productions. It's pretty easy to use, though it needs some time to get used to work with automations, because if you haven't used it a lot, then you will probably sometimes forget that an parameter is automated and that you cannot change it with your hand anymore. So what is automation? Back in the days when you did all your mixing with a mixer, you would just go anywhere and drag, for example, your volume slider down if you wanted it to reduce in volume. And if you wanted it to be louder, you just would move it up. But you only have so many fingers and hands, and you only can do it so fast and so accurate. So nowadays that we do everything inside a DAW, most of the time at least, we can use the computer to do this work for us. That means I tell my DAW that at a certain time I want this value to change. And that's about it. So to give you a quick example, let's say I want my guitar in the beginning to be real low in volume, and at the end, so if this would be my track, at the end of the track I want my guitar to be louder. So you see, I put in these two automation points, and now you can see this ascending line. And that basically means, if you look here on the left, if I start my track, the volume will be very low, and as my track continues, the line rises, and you can see at the same time my fader rises as well, just like I told my DAW to do so. You can basically automate any value inside your DAW. How can you do so? Well, you need a few things. At first, you have to find the value that you want to automate and create an automation lane for it. There is different ways to do so. Probably the easiest is you click here on the tiny drop-down button and the automation lines appear. If you click in such a line here in the window, you will see like the most commonly used automation values, for example, your panner or your volume automation. You can choose any of these and also open a new window, which will give you a lot of different possibilities to choose from. If you know where that value is, you can just go here and click on some or search with your filter option. Another possibility would be you activate your automation right button, and now if you change any value while your song plays, the automation line will be shown automatically, and also the value that you changed. So you can just move any knob just a little. Let's say I want to automate my delay, so I just move it a little and my automation send effect for the delay level appears. And the third possibility to find the correct automation line for you is that does not work for everything, but for a lot. If you click, for example, in this plugin, if you right-click a button, then it will show the option to show this value as an automation track. So if I click here, this value is now shown in my automation track. You can do this for really a lot of things, but like I said, not everything has this possibility. It depends on what you're working on. So if you have found the correct automation track for your value, you still have to do something that it will work. So right now you see all these lines here are just like grayish and nothing happens because I have not activated the read or write buttons. The write buttons, that are the red ones, you obviously need them if you want to write the automation data by yourself. So let's say you want to do it with your hand because you have a fader like here, or you actually have a mixer attached to your DAW or any hardware controller, then it would make sense to do it with your hand. I don't have anything attached right now. I'm just going to use my mouse to do so. So if I now start the playback of my track, I can just use the fader to write the automation in. And I can do so with any knob that I can find in my DAW. So I already have my standard panel here. So if I now go back and again start my playback and move the slider for my panel, it will be written again here. And the same thing I did for my delay send. So I go back, start my playback and write in the automation data. So, and now you can already see how powerful this tool is, because it is absolutely impossible for me to do this at the same time with my hands and to do it so accurate. So now every time I play back my track, all these values will be changed according to my movement of the buttons or faders. So you can see right now here, like how the delay changes, and the same happens, of course, with my panner and my volume fader. And it will be all the time exact the same for every time I repeat the song and for all the values that I put in down here. That gives me the opportunity to bring movement into my mix, and that is what I want. I don't want it, most of the time at least, I don't want it to be static. I want it to be natural and organic, and therefore I need sometimes drastic and sometimes only slight changes in my mix. All the changes I did right now were for one track, and I can do this for as many values as I want, and of course for every track I have in my mix. If you don't want to use your fader, or if you don't have any hardware controller, you can of course draw in the changes yourself if you go to your pencil tool. You can just click anywhere and draw in the changes that you want. If you do so, there will be a few options available. For example, this round dot here in the middle gives you the possibility of a Bezier curve. And that means if you just grab it and drag it, you can apply different kinds of curves to your value. So if you have any line and you hover over it, this dot will appear. Not for straight lines, just for diagonal lines. So another thing is you have this little diamond on the top, and if you go there and grab it, you can apply changes to the whole length where the diamond appears. So if you hover over it, you see that green line shows you for how long you will apply this change. So if you want to apply a quick and constant change between 2 points, you just create 2 points by clicking anywhere like so, and you go to the diamond, and then you can apply changes to everything inside that range of time. And another thing you can of course do is if you select some of these automation points, then the smart controls will appear. They are here on the top, here on the top, here on the side, down at the bottom, and here in the middle. Of course, you can change all these depending on the function keys you use, like Shift and Command or Alt and Option. If you want to know how these smart controls work, check out the video I made about it. I'm not going to talk about it here again because it takes so much time. If you want to see the value where your cursor line is currently at, you can see it here in the tiny window on the left. So if you look here and I start my playback, you can see the value is constantly changing. And it always shows me that exact value where my cursor line is. If you want to go to a certain value, you can of course just grab that dot and move it around, and you maybe will find the exact value where you want to go. But sometimes it's a little difficult because the values have so many possibilities. So what you can do is you go to your info line, and if you select one of the dots, it will show the value here. And if you want to change it and go to exactly, let's say 6.5, then you just write it in here and hit enter, and the value will be 6.5. Sometimes you did find a good value and you don't want it to change, but you want to move that automation point. Therefore, you would just grab it and move it around, but then you don't have your 6.5 anymore, and now you want to find it, and it is sometimes hard to get that exact value back. So then you have to go again up here and type in your 6.5. That is of course not practical, and therefore you have another possibility. If you want to move that around to another point in time, but you want to keep this 6.5 value, you can do so by holding down your Command key. If you do so, it will only change the value in one direction. So right now I want to change it to another point in time, and it keeps my 6.5. I can also do this for the other option, which would be I want to keep my point in time, but I want to change the value. So I hold down my command key and I drag this point up and down. That means the value changes, but not the point in time where I put my automation point. So like I said, here is another function for a Bezier curve. You can still use it together with the diamond function, which is pretty helpful. You can do a lot of fast changes really easy here. If you want to have a really constant change in your values, not like I did here, but something that changes constantly and always with the same value, then I would give you the advice to take the line tool. What you can do here is you draw in a line according to the line that you choose here in the top from your dropdown. This is interesting if you want to automate, for example, an effect in electronic or in pop music, like an LFO or an auto pan or something like that, that should change and bring some movement to your track. If you did draw something that you like and you want to keep that, you can just select these with your range or object selection tools and use the function for duplication, which is Command and D. Therefore, you don't have to draw it all the time again. You just put it in afterwards. If you want to have this automation at a different point, you can do so by selecting these, and if you hover over your selection, your mouse changes to a hand, and now you can just drag it somewhere. If you realize now, oh, I didn't want that, that is the wrong place where I dragged it, you just press escape and it will jump back at the original location. If you do so with your range selection tool, you can also use this function and also copy that to other lines by holding down your Option, Alt or Option key. So you see, wherever you had that, you just Alt and drag it somewhere else and it will appear here as well. Now I have these two exact same automations on two tracks, and if I wanna work on these at the same time, I just select them, and you see if I use this button, I can either work only on one track or on both at the same time. So if I use it only on the top track, I would use the buttons for the smart controls, and if I want to use it on both tracks, I use the smart controls and hold down my command key. A few more things to know are, if you right click here, you can select all the events. If you want to get rid of the automation data that you wrote, you can just right click, select all the events, or right click and delete this entire track. Then you will get a warning, because it's not only deleting the track, it's also deleting the data on it. So that is important, because let's say we have automation here and I click here in the name and select something else. That does not mean that I deleted the automation I had here before. That is non-destructive. So if I click again here, let's say I have here also something. So right now I only have one track, automation track, visible. But if I click again in my name, you can see some of these have the little stars, and that means there is automation available and it is not deleted. Even though I only have one track visible now, the other automation data is still here. And if I click, for example, to volume, you see it reappears. And if I click for my panner, then it appears. I can work on my panner. And if I want to go back to volume, I can work on my volume. And I can go to my dynamics. And back to my panner, and everything is still here. So that is a non-destructive function. You can of course go down here. So if you have all your lanes closed, you can show them with the drop down. But then a new drop down appears with a plus. And if I click on the plus, a new automation line will appear. And the same goes backwards. If I hover here to the top and click on the minus, the automation lines will vanish. So now I have 4 open, and I can just choose, for example, the ones where I worked on, or just anything else. So like I said, if you right click your track, you have a few options. If you click in the name, other options will appear, like delete certain data. And one more thing, which is pretty important, is your automation window, which you can open by either pressing F6, or you have it activated here in your top line. Therefore, you have, of course, to activate it here. And then you can go to your automation edit button, and the automation window will open. I'm not going to go through all of these because that will take up too much time, and not all of this is super easy, so I'm just gonna explain the basic functions here and the ones you can use really easy. One thing in the automation window which is really helpful is you can show the data on your automation track. So for example, if you have data on your track, then in your automation line, that data will also be shown. And that works for MIDI data as well as for audio material, which is really helpful because then you can exactly see where you are right now on your track and what you put in. That you can show or hide here. I would also, if that is not a default, activate this value here, and that means that as soon as you move a knob, the corresponding automation track will be opened in your project window. Here you see 3 buttons here. The one is the activate read for everything or deactivate it. So for every track you have in your project, you can globally activate and deactivate the read function. That means the automation that you did right will be read or not. So right now I have automation data, but nothing happens because it is deactivated. And if I activate it again, you can see the values change again. The same button you have, of course, for write. You can activate or deactivate all your write functions, and you can, if you have written automation data or if you're going to, then you can globally bypass all of these. These are different automation modes, which I will explain in another video, and a automation function menu. Interesting and easy to use are these 3 columns: suspend read, suspend write, and the show hide column. These do basically what you would think they would do. So if I wanna write data here on my track, but I do not want to change my volume automation, I just deactivate it here and say suspend write. So you see, at that moment, the write button for volume did get inactive, while all the others are still active. I can also do the same for my panel, then hopefully this button will get inactive. Of course, you can do the same for your read function. So if you have written volume automation, you cannot change it manually anymore. You see, if I drag my slider and I want to change the value, it's not working. It jumps back to where my automation is. If I want to change it manually now, I can suspend the read volume, and now I can change it again, and you see the difference is these are all green, they are active, and this one is gray, it is inactive, but it shows a white line, and that is what I do manually right now. If you're working with a lot of automation, then it can be quite a lot of work to find these automation tracks that you've written, and therefore you have the show or hide buttons. For example, if I click on the show volume, then it will show me all the volume automation of all my tracks. And therefore, it's not important if I have written data on them or not. If I click on show volume automation, it will show all my volume automation for every track, even if I didn't write any automation data. The same happens if I click on show my panorama automation. All my tracks will show panorama automation, and then you see it gets a lot of tracks really fast. And if I want to hide all these, it's a lot of work, except if I use my hide all button in the automation window. So right now I have written data for some of the tracks, but not for all of them. And that means if I click on show my panorama automation, it will show all of my panorama automation, even though I haven't written automation on several of the tracks. And that is annoying. I don't want that. I only want the data that I have written to be shown. And therefore, you can check here the used only. And that means if I now click on panorama, it will only show the one where I have actually automation data on it. So I hope that was helpful to you. I will do another video about more automation working tips concerning the additional functions of automation here in the automation window. If you want to know how to work with the smart controls or the line tool, check out my other videos. I will leave a link in the description down at the bottom.